Oh, you're fine. You're fine. We are live. So we have exactly one follower, our very first live broadcast. Here we are from CSUN. Chad and Dax here. You know us from our weekly podcast, Chax Chat. And today we are going to actually be broadcasting live from the CSUN Assistive Technology Conference. So thank you guys for joining us live.
Absolutely. This is great to be here in California for the CSUN conference, right?
No snow, Chad, right?
No snow. But my, whenever I come to the West Coast, my body is still on East Coast time, right? So like one of my favorite quotes is look in California, but feel in Minnesota, and so I am in California, but my brain and my body are still in Pennsylvania, but well, all good stuff.
Either way, enjoy. Welcome to the sun. I hear it is supposed to be rainy up in Sacramento. I'm down in LA right now. So my wife is handling the farm, the alpaca.
Oh boy.
We have a barn cat and we're trying to get her used to the chickens. And so right now there's chaos because the chickens can't be out in the rain. They'll just get soaking wet. And the barn cat is in their normal run. So I think there's going to be a little baptism by fire today with the barn cat getting used to the chickens. So hopefully we have some chickens left when we get home.
All right.
Awesome. Well, we're so glad to be broadcasting live to you today. Today's sponsors are?
Today's sponsors are AbleDocs, since we're sitting here in their booth at CSUN.
Absolutely.
So thank you, AbleDocs, for that. But also our big sponsor is North Idaho College and the upcoming Pave the Way to Global Accessibility Awareness Day on Wednesday, April 20th in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. More information on the PWG-AAD free accessibility technology exhibit can be found at nic.edu/A11Y. So we want to thank them once again for being our sponsor on today's podcast. My name is Chad Chelius, everyone. I'm an Adobe certified instructor and accessible document specialist, as well as a trainer and consultant.
And my name is Dax Castro. I'm an Adobe certified PDF accessibility trainer, as well as certified as an accessible document specialist by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. See, we don't have the opportunity to edit all these flubs out when we're doing this
editing
live
today, right?
Yeah.
So you guys, you're going to get all of our mistakes.
And you would be so surprised at how many edits that go into a podcast. You think, oh, you just sit down and start recording and it's all good, right? I would say on average, there's somewhere between 50 and 100 small cuts in a single 40-minute broadcast. It's pretty, it's an interesting process. It does take a bit of time, right? And then of course we take those podcasts and on our website, chaxchat.com, we put the transcript on the website. So there's a process that has to go through there. And originally I used to edit those. We got a few comments back and made me realize I'm not the greatest editor in the world. That's why so now we have somebody who does it. And actually that's why AbleDocs is our sponsor. So they help pay for that so that we get a professional to actually edit the text. I go in and add a few headings so that it's a little more organized. And then we post it on the web. So if you're ever looking for something that you hear us talk about in our podcast episode, go to the website and we'll usually have a link in the podcast transcript that allows you to go and find more information about that information. So happy to. And welcome. Thank you so much, Michelle, for sending us a message. So we are streaming right now live on Facebook, our Facebook PDF accessibility group, on LinkedIn under my profile, and then on PDF Accessibility, the YouTube page. So whichever platform you decide you want to follow us on, if you post a comment, we'll be able to share that comment with the world. If you've got a question for us, we want to answer that for you. Yeah. That's what we're here for today. So if you've got burning questions in between our chat back and forth, we're going to answer the questions that you might have. So yeah.
So, we've already gotten a couple of really great questions, being here at the conference, right? And, a couple of people have come up to us with some great questions. And I think the first one was in regards to formulas.
Oh, yeah.
In math. A PDF file, math formulas, right? And so, math formulas are particularly challenging. One, because, Dax and I are always preaching, do as much as you can in the source document to kind of facilitate the process. When it comes to formulas, however, that capability is limited at best, right? I mean, let's just say, like, the fundamental way of making a formula accessible, of course, is to add tag it as a formula and then add alternate text to that formula.
Yep.
And you're basically just describing the formula. And as I learned when I was doing some work in this, a math formula, there are names for all of those different components in a formula.
They're not curly bracket. And I mean, I call things differently. I mean,
I do the same thing. It's like, okay, squiggly curly bracket.
Right.
And then, so I was learning, I had mentioned a colleague of mine, Ferdinand Schwer, who he's the author of Math Tools, which is an InDesign plugin. And I was talking to him about this whole process, and he was explaining to me that it's really a limitation of InDesign. The InDesign software development kit doesn't allow that formula to be passed on to the PDF, right? So there's a lot of limitations that we run into, but fundamentally, what you try to do is tag the formula as a formula tag, and then write alternate text to describe that formula.
Right. And, a lot of the times as accessibility professionals, we don't know what it is it's supposed to be. We don't know if you're supposed to put the things in parentheses get read first, or if you're just reading it linear, or do you need to say, when do you say over? And in engineering world, a lot of times there's these function, and I'm not even sure I understand them. It's like F equals, and then it's like 5 different formulas that you have to figure out. I'm like, how do you go through that? How does somebody walk through that? So that's where you want to sit down with your content creator teams early on and get an idea. Hey, what are you going to be doing? Are you going to be doing some formulas? Great. Who's the person they need to talk to get those equations written out? How do I say them? And matter of fact, there is usually what I would do before is I would figure out what the equations are, develop an Excel spreadsheet that has a page number of where the equation is, and then the alt text in the next column. And I'd give that to the content creators and say, okay, fill this out and give it back to me. So I have a list of alt text, right? But actually, part of one of the scripts that I developed for InDesign would allow me, now that I'm thinking about it, would allow me to take those entire formulas and inject them right into my InDesign document in one shot, because at that point it's alt text, right? So the alt text automator, extractor, script would do that. But it used to have to do this by hand, and so, being the person that would write the alt text, if you give that to them the day before it's published because you waited until the end, I mean, that's a huge bottleneck. And half the time you just end up making something up on your own. And then of course, when you do that, it's always an issue. So,
well, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I am the worst person in the world to be writing alternate text for somebody's document.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And that's especially true when it comes to formulas. I do remember, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, right? So that's parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division,
right,
and addition.
And right? Sally?
Subtraction. Yeah.
I'm going to have to remember that. I don't think I ever learned that in school. It is definitely an interesting thing, the things we retain when we're sitting in those little desks waiting for the school bell to ring for recess or lunch.
For sure.
Yeah.
So another topic I wanted to bring up, and this was on our Facebook group. It was actually this morning, I think, and forgive me, I don't remember the person's name, but she was running into a situation where she had a tagged PDF document, and she was noticing that in the content object of the tag, there were spaces missing between certain words.
Oh, okay.
Right. And through the conversation, I had been able to kind of interpret from what she was saying, but the source document was using soft returns.
Right? Soft returns, yeah.
So if you're not familiar with soft returns, a soft return essentially is it's basically what the giveaway was. She had said that in the content, it was showing up as an NBSP.
Oh, NBSP, which is HTML for non-breaking space.
Non-breaking space,
exactly.
Right? And when I saw that, I'm like, ding, 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 you know? And so in the document world, a non-breaking space is a soft return.
Exactly.
Right? So a hard return, new paragraph. Soft return will break the line at that location, but will not create a new paragraph.
Right.
And the problem becomes is a lot of times people will replace the space after the word at the end of the line with a soft return.
Yep.
And therefore, and a soft return is not considered a space character.
Right.
So that's why she was getting two words mashed up against one another.
Exactly.
It's basically the last word of one line and the first word of the next line.
Right.
And they're just mashed together. So it's a pretty simple fix.
Sure.
You simply need to make sure that if you're using soft returns, make sure you put a space before that soft return so that you're giving your content the appropriate space.
Yeah. You know, you see that in headings a lot where I'll have a chapter heading and I want to break it because one word needs to be on the top line. The next one needs to be on the bottom line. And if you do it the other way, which is put an actual return with a no space, no space before, space after, then you end up with two H1 tags or two paragraphs or two spans inside the H1, right? So you kind of have to think about, okay, which direction do I really want to go with it? And that was Katie. Katie Hastings was the one who had mentioned that comment in our PDF accessibility Facebook and group. And for those of you who don't know, we do have a PDF accessibility Facebook group, and we have about 2,200 members, and it is so active. Literally every single day, we are, we are posting stuff. Matter of fact, Colleen Gratzer. Hey, Colleen, how's it going? We're looking forward to seeing Colleen Gratzer, who is another accessibility powerhouse, at the Creative Pro week, which is coming up next. Oh, look, and I'm watching this on Facebook, and it even has captions going on the Facebook Live in our Facebook group. That's pretty cool.
Very good.
So, although they spelled her name wrong, Gratzer, right? But she is great as well. And I look to her because she has a very specific cadence when she presents, and she always gets positive feedback that says, the speed in which you present, it really gives me time to digest and understand what you're saying. And I always bring that up because I find it funny, because in the very first time I met Colleen, I'm like, let me give you a pointer. You speak a little slow, and there's kind of this pregnant pause in between how you speak. And she's like, yeah, Dax, like, that's on purpose because you talk way too fast. And well, she didn't say that, but my understanding is I talk way too fast. And so I really try to look up to her from that, take that advice, and really try to maybe not pause while I'm in the middle of a sentence, but at the end, I try to give just a half a second of pause time, because normally I would just keep going, and I find that I snowball. The faster I go, and it really, some people are, it's a little much for some people for sure, right? So anyway, all of that to say, the Facebook group is there, PDF accessibility, and we are so happy to have you guys in the group. So, we're here at CSUN, Chad, and it's fairly well attended. I mean, of course, COVID, right? And so there's not as many people, and it is definitely a less attended experience than the one I was at 2 years ago when COVID was actually announced. But I will say one of the biggest things I get from coming to CSUN is it falls under that statement, nothing about us without us. And we as professionals, as remediation professionals, are always behind the camera or behind the screen doing the accessibility of the document, but we hardly ever get that opportunity to interact with people who use assistive technology on a daily basis. And being here at CSUN, you cannot walk down the hall without seeing someone who is using assistive technology to navigate their life. And it is so enriching for me, I think, to really validate the why. And for those of you who've been listening to me for any length of time, I'm very much a user advocate. I'm really all about the user. And part of this is my recharge of coming here to CSUN and being able to interact with and make friends with and talk with people who are having those kind of experiences and finding out how our work directly impacts their lives.
Yeah, I mean, you and I, Dax, we end up we're heavily on the technical side of this process, right?
Yep.
We're all about, execution and making it happen. But fundamentally, I mean, what we're doing is we're advocating for accessibility,
Yep.
for people, and being here at CSUN and being able to just kind of be surrounded by all these different people using varying assistive technology is just a really great experience. And it reminds us, at least it reminds me, like, why we're doing this, the purpose behind it.
Well, and there are all types of people with all types of abilities here. I was walking down the hallway, and there was a nice lady who was in a wheelchair, and she had a touchpad, and the touchpad had words on it. So she was actually using the touchpad to communicate because she was nonverbal, and it was really an interesting process to watch. And I really try to be careful and respectful of people, because really people are people, and you have value absolutely as a person. And I don't ever want to treat anyone as something interesting to watch. But it really gives you insight as to the struggles of people, who have to deal with accessibility on a daily basis. I was standing in line to check in, and there was a gentleman to my left who was non-sighted, and we were all in line, and he was kind of not really in line, but maybe sort of. And I'm thinking about his experience. He's trying to listen to the person taking helping the person at the counter, and listening to for that person to say next, for them to call us up. But then he's got to figure out, okay, am I in line? Are there people near me? Is it my turn next? How do you navigate that experience?
Yeah.
And I looked over and I said, oh, hey, sir, just want to let you know you're the next one in line. He's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Because he was just, I could tell from the way he was kind of intently listening to try to, deduct what's going on in that situation. And it was just, it makes me very proud to be doing what we do in this field.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, wow. It's so interesting to be live, right? Because there's no downtime, right? We can't just stop the podcast and be like, okay, what do we want to talk about next? Right.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I did want to mention is that, we often help businesses, companies navigate through accessibility, and everyone is at a different stage. Sometimes the organization is small and they've got just a small team. Sometimes it's an organization that's large, 50,000 or more employees, but the accessibility department is not existent, or it's just one or two people, or it's a group of 10, but they really don't have any support, or they have great support. And one of the things that you and I worked on, and I won't mention this other company because we're not there yet. We have to get approval from the company, but we helped an organization create an accessible brand standards, or a accessibility guidelines manual. And this manual was like about 50 pages, and it included checklists, and it included best practice, like one sheets that they could just because they were like, hey, look, we just want to give something to our editors without having to teach them a class or understand what they're going through. We just need to give them something they can read and go, okay, this is what I need to do. And so we have this guide, writing accessibly, that allows them to kind of read it and get a little primer on how can I talk about things in a non-spatial language. I'm not saying in the next paragraph or above, the image on the right is this, or the image below is that, because there is no above or below. It's next paragraph, or this chapter, or this reference, and having a link. Those types of things help make a document more accessible for people. So they asked for these documents, so we built them all in. And then, Chad, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the HHS requirements that they asked for.
Yeah. So that was an interesting requirement because, to be honest, I mean, a lot of the times when we're doing instruction or when we're doing documentation, HHS is not really a requirement, right? And so this particular client, however, does work for a federal agency who does fall under HHS. And here we are using acronyms again. If you're not familiar, HHS is the Department of Health and Human Services of the U.S. federal government. And so because they do work for HHS, they need to follow HHS guidelines. And so if you're not familiar, I mean, from a standards perspective, we have WCAG, we have PDFUA, at least if we're talking about document accessibility, WCAG, PDFUA. And of course, Section 508 is essentially WCAG, but there's also HHS.
Right.
And HHS, I mean, for better or for worse, I mean, HHS kind of, I think what they did is they took WCAG, but then they added additional requirements to the standard, and they kind of came up with their own standard.
Well, HHS is the Department of Health and Human Services. And to be fair, a lot of their clients are people with disabilities.
Sure.
And so they said, look, we understand that WCAG gives us the minimum viable product. It gives us an accessible documented spaces. But we want to include some things that, usually the standard is a single A or double A. Hardly ever do you get a AAA requirement, right? HHS kind of falls under that more of the AAA requirement, like some things like table summaries. HHS requires table summaries for every table in your document. Well, CAG AA does not require them at all. It's not a requirement, but to make your document more accessible, to give people more information, they have that as a requirement.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the big one, right, is the table summary.
Right.
Right. Where like under WCAG or PDFUA, table summaries are not required. That's
right.
not, I mean, I think it used to be.
Right.
Years ago, it was required.
Well, if you open the Acrobat checker, it actually has a checkbox in there. It's the only one unchecked when you go to run the checker. And so if you're trying to check for those, you have to actually manually go back in and check it. At first, it was checked by default, and you would always get that as an error saying that you don't have, you have no table summaries.
And I think that's where a lot of the misconception for a lot of people comes from. If they're still using Acrobat 11 or something like that, that I think is still checking for the table summary.
Right.
Right. And so if they're getting an error, they're like, oh, I need to add a table summary.
Right.
And part of the challenge with that, the only way to add a table summary is in Acrobat after, I should really clarify, in a PDF editor after the PDF has been created.
Right.
Because no source application in Design, Word, PowerPoint can add a table summary to a table.
Well,
am I right on that?
You are, but what happens is that you can add it inside Word, and you can add it with Access Word, but what it ends up being is alt text on the table.
It's in the wrong field.
It's in the wrong field.
Yeah.
There is no field. If you right click on a tag and go to properties, there is no field for table summary. The only way to add a table summary is to open the read order tool, the touch-up read order tool, and then go into click on that table and then go into edit table summary and get to it, right? And so that's a complicated process.
And not to contradict you, but I mean,
but you are,
but I am. But I mean, technically, when you add that table summary, it adds an entry. When you go into edit tag,
right.
So it's kind of automatically adding that entry. I guess if you wanted to, you could manually add that entry if you were into pain and suffering.
So Chad, how many times do we start telling people how to edit the content key for an image, right? Because that's where the alt text goes. And immediately people's eyes glaze over and they're just like, you want me to do what? And so the idea of adding that summary is in the same kind of vein. If I got to open up the tag, go to edit tags, and then create new tag, and then add the drop down, and then go in and know what to type. And is it an integer or a name or a...
Well, yeah. And to your point, the other day I was remediating a document. Actually, I think it was the handout for CSUN here. And I was making it compliant, and it needed alt text.
Oh no!
Because I did it the right way, and so I'm like, so I just deleted it and did it, did it the regular way.
Hey, so we have people coming in.
Yeah, we're getting some guests here
absolutely.
At CSUN.
So that's Susan, right? So Susan Paré is that Paré? Paré is one of our Facebook group members, and she is great. She is a high contributor to the content and everything that is in our group. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And you have, what's funny is at CSUN, right? We meet new people all the time. And right now I don't have eye contact because the camera is literally like right in front, but someone that that you've known for a while is here at CSUN.
Yes. And I forget your name already. Summer. Summer and I worked together. I had to look into my emails, but we figured out a couple of years ago, I did InDesign and accessibility training for her company, HDR. And you know, we haven't seen each other since, but it was so great to actually meet her in person. And that's one of the fantastic things about, you know, these conferences and CSUN specifically. You know, I was able to put a face to a name, and because we did our training remotely, and we figured that it was in August of 2020, so that was right in the middle of COVID, right? That was, you know, and so but yeah, it's just so great to see everybody here. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Absolutely. And we wanted to field some questions. So we have Summer and Susan in our audience. And if you guys have any questions for us about accessibility or something you're struggling with, or maybe an approach to something, we'd love to answer those questions for you and for anyone. So in whatever field, oh my gosh, she just pulled out a list. She literally, okay, I gotta have, I gotta come here, come here, Susan. So I gotta, she literally has a list of questions. This is awesome, but I don't have my glasses, so I am gonna, let's give it back to her so she can read it to us. All right, so we're so happy to field these questions. So Susan, why don't you go ahead and ask your first question?
And do you want to remind everybody that they can also ask a question on, can't they ask a question on?
Yeah, you just did. You just reminded them that they can ask a question on
there you go.
Social media, right?
Yeah, exactly. There we go.
So yes, if you're on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube, you can ask a question and we'll be happy to answer those questions. And matter of fact, look at Francis Smith just posted a comment. So Sue. Oh, so Susan's question is about, so she had already had a document. It was finalized, but she got the Word doc back and somebody had created a bunch of text boxes. What happens typically is if someone has taken a Word doc and made a PDF out of it, and they don't have access to the source anymore, and they go, hey, Acrobat, go file, save as, Word doc. And it had columns in it or something that the Acrobat doesn't understand. How does Acrobat create that Word document? Oh, it adds everything inside text boxes. So you get a bunch of text boxes in your newly created Word doc.
I wish we could have shown Summer's reaction to her question. That was classic, right? But I mean, the other reality is it's possible that somebody built the document with text boxes, you know,
right.
You know, I always tell people, like, Word has a very natural top to bottom flow.
Right.
And as long as you work with that and you honor it, your order is just not even a factor. Right. But when you start adding text boxes, you're kind of going outside of Word's normal document flow. And it typically gets anchored at some point in the text of that top to bottom flow, not always particularly where you want it to be.
Right. And what's interesting is sometimes the anchor will show at the top of the text box. You export the PDF and the anchor is actually, the read order actually is at the end of that paragraph. So you have to always go back and check. Floating text boxes used to be absolutely do not use them at all. And then Word got better at how it exports. And now if you use them, you just have to be really careful about going and checking the PDF at the end and making sure that it did get placed in the right order to where it is. And I find people use those text boxes because they're not familiar with section breaks and page breaks, and they don't understand how those work. And it's very overwhelming when you get a document edited by someone else that has section breaks and page and continuous page breaks and things like that. And you start editing, and all of a sudden stuff starts jumping around all over. So that's why I always turn on reveal hidden characters when I'm working in a Word doc, because that gives me those clues. It shows you in there, here's a page break, here's a section break. And I know that if I go in and edit something at the end of one of those, I'm not going to undo their page break or section break. You know, Francis actually, so was that the question? What do we do with that, or why does that come up? So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot you can do. I mean, if you're using Word's native export, I mean, you could be a little more conscientious of where they're anchored. You know, that can help. But each text box, I think, in the tag structure of the PDF shows up as a section tag, right? And so, you know, there's not a lot you can do. I mean, we are here in the AbleDocs booth, so I would be remiss if I didn't mention Access Word. Access Word does a tremendous job of helping with that. And even you know, I love getting those Word documents where there's like 27 returns behind an image.
Oh yeah, because they put the title page.
Yeah,
they made a title page and like text up here. Oh,
and I mean, you know, if you're natively exporting in Word, you've got 27 empty tags.
Right.
Access Word just says goodbye. Yep. Right. It just says we don't need these, and it gets rid of them. So
well, and you know, Access Word also would take all those text frames and they'd be gone. It would just map them all out. And even if somebody put those in tables, there's a way to mark a table inside Word as a layout table. And then you can actually tell it which direction to read, whether it's across and down or down and across, or, you know, whatever the case may be. You know, Francis Smith posted a comment. She said, it would be so awesome when InDesign incorporates more options for accessibility so we don't have to fix them inside Acrobat. I'm a little confused by that because she says, you know, better tag mapping for style.
Well, I think what she may be talking about, I mean, because the tag mapping to headings is solid, right? I mean, you could do that, but I know a lot of people are like, why can't I map a style to a caption tag? Or why can't I map a style to, you know, another tag? And, you know, there's a couple approaches to that. I mean, one is, again, another fantastic company you should check out if you haven't already is Exeo.
Oh, yeah.
Who makes Made to Tag for Adobe InDesign. And I will tell you, Made to Tag does have the ability to map to a caption and to some other tags that are not available natively inside of InDesign. But you know, another trick that you can use that I use sometimes is if you create a paragraph style called caption with a capital C, by the way, and you apply it. It doesn't really matter what you map it to, but when the PDF is made, you can go into your role map. And if you delete the role map that is mapping a caption to a P and you delete it, now that tag is going to be renamed to caption. So it's kind of like a trick, you know, it's a workaround, don't get me wrong, but it's a way that you can, if you have a lot of captions in your document, it's like a couple seconds and all of your items are tagged correctly.
And you know, what's interesting about that is I think that if you, I'm pretty sure that because caption is a standard tag and paragraph is a standard tag, if you try to run that through Pack 3, you're going to get a standard tag mapped to a standard tag error. And it's going to tell you, hey, you're not going to pass Pack until you remove that. You get that with Artifact. Because a Word, Microsoft, listen, come here, follow with me. Artifact is not a tag right now that belongs in the tags tree. Don't map it to a P tag. Just artifact it like it's supposed to be. Just get rid of it, please. Because we have to go through and spend our time untagging that stuff. Because I find artifact is mapped to a paragraph. And then instead of unmapping it, now I just have a bunch of artifacts in my document that I've got to go through, and you can't make it. This is the only time we'll ever tell you it's okay to delete, just plain straight delete something from the tags tree. If it's marked as an artifact in the tags tree and it's labeled that way correctly, you can just delete it because it still exists in the content key and as a artifact. It just doesn't belong in the tags tree. And so, you know, that makes it easier. But who wants to go through and select a bunch and delete, right? I mean, that's just a problem.
But, you know, getting back to what you had mentioned about that error in like the Pack checker, I think that's a good thing, because I think the error is it like a circular reference?
Yeah, I think it is
a circular reference. So it's really saying you cannot map a standard tag to another standard tag.
Right.
But I think that's a good thing because it reminds you, oh, that's right. I created a caption style. I got to delete that role map, and that'll remove the error, but it'll also tag, it'll name your tag correctly as a caption.
Right. It'll reveal that, right? Because for those of you who don't know, the role map really is, I mean, when we create styles in our documents, we have, I mean, I've had documents that are 200 pages and I might have 50 or 60 styles in there. I'm kind of a style, you know, character style, paragraph style kind of guy. And if they are a non-standard style, they aren't H1, H2 through 6, paragraph, or some of the other standards, it all gets renamed or relabeled to a paragraph tag. And that's done in the role map. The role map is kind of this instruction key that keeps track of both of those things and then just makes the tags tree more simple. So yeah. Summer, cool. Did you have a question?
I do. This is one I get often at my organization. So if you remediate a public-facing non-federal document,
okay,
to Section 508 compliance, does that also cover PDFUA?
So if you so her question was, if I've got a public-facing document and I've remediated it to meet WCAG's guidelines, it passes WCAG.
Actually, she said Section 508.
Section 508, but Section 508 is WCAG. There is no extra layer there, right? Some organizations, 301549, EU 301549, they have other things besides WCAG that there are incorporated in there. So it isn't always a one-to-one. But if your document meets WCAG standard, does it also meet PDFUA standard? The answer is no, it does not. Yeah. It's the other way around. If your document is PDFUA compliant, it will always meet WCAG if you've done the other things like color contrast, color blindness, et cetera, because PDFUA is the technical standard. It doesn't address color because they leave that to WCAG and those guidelines. But your PDFUA ensures that your tags tree is as compliant from a code standpoint as possible. Yeah. So it's if I had to pick which one to follow first, I would start with PDFUA because then I know that I'm going to be, almost all the way there for WCAG. And the things that I need to be compliant for WCAG are manual checks anyway. There's no color contrast or colorblind checker built into a PAC or any other validator. So yeah. Awesome. Susan, you have a list? You have more? I'm willing to take more. And for those of you who are they're fine. It doesn't pick it up too bad. For those of you who are online, just remember you can post a comment in whatever chat you're in. That's okay. We have another 30 minutes, so we are good. So Summer, did you have Sue, did you get your question? Uh-huh.
Is there a standard accessibility checker to ensure compliance? So whether it's PAC 2021, I think there's a lot more than just the Adobe PC Pro validator. Is there one? Because I get that often. Which checker should we use?
Yeah. So Summer's question was is there a standard checker that we should use? And fundamentally, the answer is no, right? I mean, there's no there are several checkers out there, right? I mean, let's just, PAC 2021, there's the Common Look Validator. There are some other third-party ones out there, but I've found them to be a little bit limited, right?
Yeah, there's a couple online. There's a Dutch checker
But I mean, PAC 2021 and the Common Look Validator are very good checkers. They're very robust. I find, and again, they're both great. They both do a very good job. I find the Common Look Validator to be a little bit verbose. I think it's just a little bit confusing, so you really have to kind of sift through, but it is checking for all of the requirements. And what is kind of nice about the Common Look Validator is that you could check to a number of different standards.
Yep.
There's WCAG, Section 508, HHS, PDFUA, and I think there's one more, and I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But, and then you have the PAC 2021 checker, which is my favorite checker because it now checks for PDFUA as well as WCAG. Right there in the same checker.
Yeah, that was actually one of the great updates for the new PAC 2021 to have the ability to get WCAG as a valid thing. Because one of the biggest things here is that government organizations, honestly, no offense to anyone, have no idea what accessibility really is. They just want to know they're covered. And so they're looking for that report. They're like, we just want this report. And they may say PAC 2021 or the PAC report or the Acrobat checker report. They're like, we just need something to validate. Right. And so when they say, well, we just need to pass WCAG, just like you were asking, which do you pass, PDFUA or WCAG? There's not really a comprehensive checker. Acrobat checkers a start. So it was nice when PAC 2021 came out with the WCAG aspect, and then you could turn that on and generate a WCAG report. That was really great.
And within the PAC 2021 checker, what's nice is you can save a report. And it's really quite simple, but depending on which tab you have active, meaning PDFUA or WCAG, it will save that appropriate report. So if you're looking for a WCAG report, click on the WCAG tab, hit save report, and you now have a report that says this passes WCAG 2.1 standards. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it really comes down to personal preference. Just know there's a lot of people out there. The Acrobat checker is convenient because it's built right into Acrobat that we use every day. The problem is it does not conform to any of the standards. It's a start, as Dax said. It's a good start. But and I even use it because it lets me know if my heading levels are not nested correctly and just like obvious things. So I'll run it and check it. And then once I do, I'll then jump over to the PAC 2021 checker and finish it off. Yeah.
So before we get to your next question, Sue, Francis had a question online. Are EPUBs created in InDesign accessible, or do we have to go to HTML code and fix before publishing?
Oh, yeah. So the answer is that they can be, Francis. They certainly can be. You just have to do your due diligence, right? You want to make sure that when you are mapping your styles to tags for EPUB, that you make sure that you're mapping to a heading tag, because InDesign by default will not do that, right? So when you make an EPUB, it's just going to create a class selector for each of your styles to make it appear unique, but you really don't have any heading structure by default. So as long as you go into your export tagging in InDesign and you map, your main heading to an H1 and your subhead to an H2, just like we do for PDF, absolutely you can make an accessible EPUB out of InDesign.
Awesome. All right, Sue. Oh, sure. Right.
So I was trying to fix it, but when I tried to fix it, I couldn't remove that form itself because the annotation kept getting flagged. How would I get rid of it?
So that's a great point. So oftentimes this happens with navigation, right? So Sue's question was, I've got this form field. It's a hidden form field. I don't want it visible, but I don't want the annotation to be read either. But the form, does the form field need to stay, or you're just trying to remove the whole thing? So she's trying to get rid of the entire form field, but the problem is the annotation is still there, and you can't go into the content panel and delete the annotation. You have to find it using the find unmarked annotations thing to get it to select that hidden annotation, and then you can delete it or mark it as an artifact or mark it as something that you can then go get and remove, so you can actually get an object you can hold on to. Right. And you find this a lot with navigations. People will make a PDF and they put some navigation bar that sits across the top, but it's in the header. So it's untagged. Right. But then there's an annotation for every one of those links in the bar to go to whatever page or chapter. Well, you're like, on one hand, you have an artifacted element. On the other hand, you have this annotation that's just kind of floating out there. And every checker will tell you not associated with content, that you have this annotation that doesn't have any home. And so that's kind of that situation.
But I mean, if you go into prepare form mode, you should be able to just delete that field. And that should resolve it as well, because once you delete the field, the annotation shouldn't be there either. I don't think.
Yeah, maybe if you use the form field, if you're using the form editor, maybe. But I know that when you do it, try to do it manually, the annotation stays. Because we had, remember we were talking with Adobe that one day. I was showing them in the video. We were doing sometimes we have some meetings with people at Adobe. We get to talk to them a little bit about some of the things, and we were showing them, look, you can't right click on this and hit delete. You can't delete it in the content panel. So how do you get rid of it? And I think you were right. Matter of fact, I think you did show me that you have to go into the forms mode and then you can find it and delete it.
So Francis had a quick question. He wanted to know if I had any classes on LinkedIn on epubs. So Francis, I do not. I mean, I do have courses on LinkedIn Learning on PDF accessibility, as well as an advanced one. But Anne Marie Concepcion would be one person who would have an EPUB course, although I don't know if she gets into accessibility in her course. And then I would also check out Laura Brady.
That's who I was just trying to look up. Laura Brady is
the EPUB whiz, and I think she may have an accessibility course. But I'm not able to look that up on the fly here. But I'm pretty sure. Look for Anne Marie Concepcion and Laura Brady.
And I think Laura Brady has a good tweet. She's pretty active on Twitter. So if you look her up, then you can find that. We did have another question. Robert Ingram. Thanks, Robert. Hey, Chad and Dax. I was working on a form and it passed. But as soon as I added a fillable form field, I keep getting an error nesting of a widget annotation inside a form structure. Is there a way to fix this in Access PDF?
And I know I've seen that error before. Nesting of widget. I almost think, Robert, that you want to pay attention. So I'm assuming you're tagging those form fields. Otherwise, you get a whole bunch of other errors when you run the checker. But check where your form field is nested in the tag structure.
Yep.
Like I think so this is important, right? So you and I had discovered this, Dax, right? So when you're tagging those form fields,
right,
it matters what you have selected in the tag structure.
Right.
Because for example, Robert, if you're clicked on a form tag and you go into find to tag another form field, it's going to nest a form inside of a form.
Right.
And I think that's where that error is coming from.
I would
you have
bet.
a form inside of a form. So look in your tag structure, and Lisa Fox said she has that too. So just, you want to pay attention to where your form tags are in the tag structure and make sure that you don't have a form inside of a form, because that's illegal. All of your form tags should be sibling elements to one another. And I think if you check that out, I think you should be able to find your problem. So basically you just want to move that nested form tag out of the other form tag and just have it being read in the appropriate location in your tag structure.
I would bet that that's probably it. Yeah, no, definitely so. Summer, did you have another one?
So I get this one from my technical editors when they get the image that's not in line with the text.
Okay.
And it does not allow for the Microsoft Word to pass. What's the best advice that I could give them?
Ignore it.
Well, that was kind of what I said. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because So you're using the Word accessibility checker.
That's where I have them start.
And that's fine. That's fine.
Let's go ahead and review the question.
Oh yeah,
so
I'm
the
sorry.
question for our audience, for our listening audience, right? So her question was, because I know our mics don't pick up the audience.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the question was, if I've got an image inside Word, a native Word document, and it's not in line because I want it floating off to the right, how do I pass Microsoft Word's checker and get my image where I want it to be without the complex issue of creating columns and then all of that, right? And the answer, Chad, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is that the Word accessibility checker is not very good, and it'll let you know there are some things that the Word accessibility checker lets you know that can be helpful, right? That I think it'll do improper nesting of headings.
Yep.
I think it'll do no alt text, right? So
it'll even do color contrast on the heading text.
So those are helpful, but it doesn't really apply to PDF accessibility, right? So there's things we could do so much more in a PDF that Word is incapable of doing. I mean, the one that I always love is if you merge a cell in a table, right? And that's where people get this notion that you're not allowed to do that because the Word checker says you have a merged cell. And I think they changed this, but for a while the fix was don't merge that cell, right? It's like, okay, thank you. That's very helpful because, but the Word checker it's okay to start, but don't put too much solace into the Word checker. Even if you have a merged cell, even if you have an image that's not in line, you can make it work in the PDF file.
And not to contradict you, Chad.
But you're going to anyway.
But I'm going to. So, but there was a caveat to that. If I'm giving someone a document, a live document that needs to be accessible in a live format, then you kind of are bound. So if I know I have a person with a disability who is part of my organization or that needs that live Word document, then I really can't use merge cells in a table. And it's not because you can't make it accessible down the road. It's because the native Word document will not be able to, even if you're using JAWS inside or NVDA inside Word, it's not going to understand that custom structure that's in that element, i.e. inline or floating right, or a merge cell with complex headings, because inside Word, you don't have scope for your cells. There's no way for it to know that it's, or span, right? Scope and span are not, they get exported, but the screen reader can't understand it in the native live environment. So that's why. So in reality, it is, yes, you cannot have merge cells in a live Word doc and have it be accessible as an editable document, but absolutely you can in the PDF. And of course, we see that all the time. So,
well, and again, I mean, this is where, I'm gonna do a global plead to all of the software developers out there, right? And I'm not going to target one because they all just need to do better.
Yeah.
Right. Because you and I were working with a client, and as part of their workflow, they would pass Word documents back and forth. And some of the people involved were users with
disability,
with a disability, but they were using track changes and comments. Comments and
comments and
review and commenting, and those are not accessible.
Yeah,
like in any way, shape, or form. Nope. So they were adding. They would like delete a word. They would add a word. They could read none of that information.
Right.
And we didn't have an answer for them because the software just didn't allow it.
Well, the answer is arduous.
Oh, it is.
It is unreal arduous because when I worked for a major project in California, we had every year we'd have to publish a report and we'd open it up for public comment. People would make comments. We'd go back, make edits to that document. And then we had to publish the changed document based on those comments and show what was changed. And so originally, the first year we did it with track changes. And I had to go in and annotate, begin track change, strike through, blah, 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 end track change, blah, blah, blah. And so it was very, very arduous. In the end, for those of you listening, here's some great nuggets of wisdom. We created an appendix. We marked the paragraphs that had changed. And then we had a table in the appendix that had original text in one column and edited text in the other column. So if it was a sentence or a paragraph or whatever it was, you could see that and you could read it in cell 1. In the left column, it was what it was. And in the right column, it was what had been changed. So you didn't need all those track changes. Because what if somebody went in and they edited September 15th to September 3rd, 2022? Do you really need to go in and say September, begin track change, strike through 13, enter 20, and that whole thing? You just want to know the date was replaced from the 3rd to the 15th or whatever it was, and so I thought about the principle of what we're trying to get at. And then I created a solution that was, okay, how do we present the information in an accessible way that gives people the information they want, which is just tell me what changed, right? I couldn't imagine that experience.
Which is a great solution, Dax. But I mean, ultimately what you ended up having to do is create the process or make the process horrible for all parties involved.
Right.
You know what I mean? Rather than just use the feature that's built into the program,
right, you
had to create a convoluted solution that again was good, but it was not ideal, in any way.
Right. And so Francis, she wrote that's similar to working with legislative documents and that line numbers. Oh, so this is actually a good point to bring up. Okay, so I'm going to finish reading the rest of her comment. I'm going to actually, here, let me just post it on screen here as well. That is similar to working with legislative documents that have line numbers assigned to the lines of text. The numbers are not readable in a logical manner that doesn't make it disruptive for the flow of text. It makes it hard for individuals who use some assistive technology to able to track edits. And that is true. It's called legal pleading. And I, a couple of years ago, really took a deep dive at trying to understand how I could come up with a solution that would make legal pleading accessible. And the answer is there's not an effective, elegant solution.
No.
Because you don't want to hear the line numbers in and amongst themselves, right? How, I thought about, well, maybe I could give it some kind of summary or expanded text on just the word or something, and nothing was an elegant solution. So someone said, we just redact the page number, the legal pleading on the document. So now there's not an inequality in what's being displayed. The redaction says the person with sight doesn't get the benefit of the numbers, and the person who's blind doesn't get the benefit of the numbers as well, right? And so what we did is we commented the top of the document, says this document was originally created with line numbers that have been redacted. And so then both people get the idea of, hey, this had line numbers. If I want to know what they are, I got to go ask for it. And that created an experience that was equal in the initial presentation because they both didn't get it. There was no we found out, and the reason we came up to the redaction was we found out there was no legal requirement for the numbers to be numbered. That it just because
it was because it's all the way they've always done it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They had a court reporter sit in on the meeting, and the court reporter would just transcribe, and it just came with legal pleading. That was how it was done. And then I asked the question, do we really need this? And they went back to legal, and legal was like, no, we're just required to post it. And that was good enough. So.
And as consultants, the biggest thing we do a lot of times is ask the question why.
Yeah.
Because nobody else wants to do it.
Yep.
Nobody else wants to, and I'm not afraid to ask that question. And that's why I said, like, if the response to the question is because that's how we've always done it, okay, keep going.
Right.
Go further up the food chain and find out if it's really necessary,
Right. Awesome. Did we have any more questions? Any more burning questions? We are coming down to the end here. I can't believe it's been an hour.
I
Normally
know.
our podcasts are 40 minutes. So thank you guys so much for sticking with us.
Yeah.
And thank you to our audience for coming in and
Yes.
hanging out with us. It's great. I don't know, Chad, what do you think? Do you think that video podcast is in the future?
I don't know. I don't know how comfortable I am with not being able to edit out my mistakes, but I think we did okay this time.
Did.
We didn't do too
at
bad.
the beginning you get a little flubby, and then you kind of just sit into it. And
like I said, you have to understand there's sometimes in the middle of recording, Dax and I will like disagree with one another, and we'll like, no, that's not how it is. And he's like, oh yeah, it is. And then we'll sidebar. We'll both test it and like, oh, you're right. You know what I mean? And so he'll edit all that out, and then it's nice and clean. But no, it's fun. This was a great time. I'm so glad we did it.
Absolutely. And thank you guys so much for tuning in.
Yeah.
Again, we and Francis says great live. So of course you can follow. So I'm going to give you something that we have I've been starting to implement. If you follow me on any regular basis, mostly my hashtags on LinkedIn are A11Y and accessibility, and I use those religiously, but I'm adopting a new tag, and the new tag, and maybe Chad, you can join me in this, is always accessible, right? Because everything, it's not about, is this a requirement, and not to do anything for anybody, but if it's not just about, is this a requirement? Am I required to do it? It's everything I do. I find myself emails that I'm writing, documents. I had a counseling appointment with one of my health professionals, and she sent me a worksheet. The worksheet was not accessible. I made it accessible and sent it back to her, even though it had nothing to do with what was going on, because we should always be accessible, right? So I really do want to implement the hashtag, right? Always accessible. And if you would like to join me, for all those listening, if you want to tag your accessibility related posts with always accessible, That would be great. And a matter of fact, we're going to have some stickers in our booth at CSUN tomorrow. They're supposed to be here today, probably late today, that are always accessible stickers. So
that's great.
We would love to have you.
Absolutely. So, stop by and grab a sticker and talk with us.
Right. And for those of you listening to this after the fact, because you were rushing around trying to get some lunch into your belly before the next sessions at CSUN, feel free to stop by. Stop me in the hallway. Say hello. Happy to elbow bump with you. It's all good. We just love being back in the mix of things. And, and for those of you who have stayed at home because of health reasons, absolutely respect that decision, but would love to see you out next time when it's more safe. I mean, everyone's health is first concern, and, we definitely want to be respectful. Well, Chad, why don't you take us out?
Well, once again, we want to thank AbleDocs for having us here in their booth here at CSUN. And we also want to thank the North Idaho College and their upcoming Pave the Way to Global Accessibility Awareness Day, which is on Wednesday, April 20th in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. More information on the PWG-AAD Free Accessibility Technology exhibit can be found at nic.edu/A11Y. So we want to thank them again for being being the sponsor of today's podcast. My name is Chad Chelius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you. And that sounds so odd to do without the closing music, Chad. I don't hear my timing to the music. It's just throwing me off. But thank you, everyone. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.